All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Yes, so that's the basic story. This is my mother, Jeanette, and these are letters that I found. Okay, so the story is, I'm an only child, divorced, I don't have any children. So I had done our family genealogy back in the 1990s before the internet. But because I did genealogy and I'm the only one, I have all the stuff. And so I was living in Mass. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I was living in Central Mass for a while, and then I went home to take care of my father back to Pennsylvania. And a year and a half ago, I knew I was going to come moving back, and I had to figure out downsizing. You know, I'd been on the go for a while. I figured out I moved 9 times in the last 24 years. So there was this box, and it had moved with me. Whoops! It had moved with me. It had moved with me all of these times, and it really did look like this. And on top of it was the word stamps, because my father collected stamps at one point. And I knew that his stamp collections were in there in several binders, but I wasn't sure what else was in there. I remembered that it was in our dining room bureau. I remember in the last house that we had, and I figured it was the contents of that middle drawer that was in there, but other than that, I didn't really know. And then one day when I was moving it around, getting ready to move back to Massachusetts, I saw a little corner of an envelope that said War Department. And I thought, okay, it's more than just the stamps. There's something else in there. So I got out the box and I started looking through it, and what I found were 170 letters from the time of World War II. 54 of them were from my mother, Jeanette, to her mother and sister, but 86 of them were from 16 different servicemen that she had written to. Now, she told me stories of the war, and we all wrote to to soldiers. Everybody did it, you know, in addition to knitting socks and all these other things that they did during the war. We all wrote to soldiers that we knew. So, okay, so I started sorting them, and there were 16 different servicemen represented by these letters. Seven of them were from Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is where she's from. 4 were from Trenton, New Jersey, which was where her college roommate was from. They exchanged addresses. 4 were from Pittsburgh and might be cousins. I still don't know, and 1 person I can't place. So most of this is based in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So alas, it is not a Massachusetts story. It is not a Greenfield story. But it seems to have a little bit of universal appeal. And from what I find out is that a lot of other people are in this situation where they have letters that they're not sure what to do with. So I thought, as a former librarian and as a person who did family history, you know, if somebody had letters from one of my relatives, I'd want to know. And so I thought, I wonder if I can track down the people. I figured the soldiers were probably gone. I wonder if I could track down their descendants and give the letters back. And so that's what I started to do. And so that's how I got to meet these people. And I'm going to tell you their stories and who they were related to and how we figured it all out. And so that's what we're going to hear about in this program. So thanks for coming along for the ride for this. I think it'll be fun. First of all, a little bit of background about my parents and me. This is us, probably in the early 70s. One of those things you pose for. So my father, Louis Hosfeld, and my mother, Jeanette. Her real name was Myrtle Jeanette Banzoff, but she never went by Myrtle, except that her brother called her Myrt just to irk her sometimes. So that's us. But this really goes back to her family, the Banzoffs. And so we were from southeastern Pennsylvania, which was a lot of German ancestry. So my maiden name is Hosfeld. Her maiden name was Banzoff. And she was one of 4 children. Bertha was the oldest. They called her Bill. Charles was the next in line. They called him Bud. Now, I know my cousins have a picture of him in an Army uniform. They just haven't given it to me yet so that I could use it. So I found an old family photo that had a lot of people in it, and he was in the background making a face. But this pretty much encapsulates my Uncle Bud. Okay. Then there was John in his uniform over there, and my mom, Jeanette, on the end. Also in the Banzoff family, whoops, this goes really fast. Also in the Banzoff family was their mother, Anna. Now this is a much older picture of her, when she is much older because she's holding me. So that's probably around 1959. Also key to this story is Teddy the dog. Got 2 pictures of Teddy the dog. He was the family dog. And they lived, like I said, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, so here's Philadelphia, here's Allentown, over there is New Jersey. We lived in Lancaster. My parents were both from the Allentown area, but they met in Philadelphia, and outside of Philadelphia, they eventually settled in Lancaster. Also, sort of key to the story is York over here. So there are some leftover British names in Pennsylvania as well as in Massachusetts. So they've got some, and I was from Lancaster. It's very hard for me to say Lancaster, Massachusetts, but that's where we were. So they were in Allentown. This is a panoramic view of the skyline of Allentown. Currently, some of those buildings are a lot newer and weren't there when the Banzoffs lived there. It was a German community mostly, some Italian. Today, of course, it is as diverse as most cities are. Back then it had about 100,000 people, now it has about 120. This is the major building. This is the building that nobody else can get higher than, and it's the PP&L building. It's Pennsylvania Power and Light. It's the equivalent of their national grid, the electric company for that part of the world. It was the biggest employer. I'm not sure it still is, but it was the biggest employer at the time. The Banzoffs lived at 35 North Madison Street, which is this side of this little house. And Anna was raising these 4 children on her own. Her husband died, my grandfather died when my mother was only 5 or 6 years old. And so I'm not exactly sure how she and the family were surviving. When I asked my mom, when I was doing genealogy, how they lived and their childhood and everything, she and my aunt and my uncles always said, you know, we were poor, everybody was poor, we were all in the same boat. It was like, you know, everybody was experiencing the same situation. I do have a picture of my mom and my aunt and Teddy sitting right there on that exact thing. And I was going to try to get a photograph and try to match it up, but you know, the lighting and everything, it just never worked right. So some of their cultural activities, of course, they had to go to school and they had to walk 8 very long blocks to Allentown High School. Everybody walked. There were no school buses. There were city buses, but you'd have to pay, and they weren't going to pay, so everybody walked. At the time, Allentown only had 1 high school, and this was it. Now they have 2, and this one's called William Allen High School. But at the time, it was the Allentown High School. And then once a week, they walked a couple of blocks to Christ Lutheran Church. Being a very German community, there are a number of Lutheran churches. Christ Lutheran Church was on the main street, Hamilton Street, it still is, in Allentown, and it was one of the bigger ones too. So, going back to these letters, some of them were regular letters, airmail letters. Some of them were handwritten on regular paper, but some of them were V-mail. And what I want to do is pass around some of this. So you see there. So you see what these are. And so what these are, I'm going to pass some of these around. These are from my uncle, and I don't think he shares any family secrets in them. So it says War and Navy Departments as the return address, and then there's these very tiny letters. So what happened was wherever they were in Europe or in the South Pacific, the soldier either typed on a regular sheet of paper or hand wrote on a regular sheet of paper, and then it was microfilmed. And then they shipped the microfilm back. I guess, you know, so many people were writing letters back and forth, it was easier to deal with microfilm, but also the weight, probably. So they didn't keep the original. They microfilmed it, and then when they got it over here, then they printed it on this teeny tiny thing, and then put it in these teeny tiny envelopes, and that's what you got in the mail. And it's very hard to read, but you know, and contemporary here now, we can put this on a copier and bump it up 200%, and it comes out perfectly. But back then, yeah. The advantage, another advantage of these little V-mails is that they could be read and they could be censored if they had to be. And you see there's a couple of lines blacked out at the bottom. I don't know what my uncle was talking about on those, but evidently it either revealed something they were doing or a place where they were. And so that was part of how they could do these things. So I'm going to pass them around, and then when you guys get it, you get it over to that side. So those were interesting, and I had, yeah. See, I apologize for my clicker doing weird things. Okay. So a little bit about Jeanette, my mom. This is from her high school graduation, high school yearbook, class of 1944. And in the time period, you know, they always pick a slogan to attach to you. And the slogan for her is, "A babbling brook is never still." That encapsulates my mom pretty much. She was very dynamic. She was outgoing. She was a force to be reckoned with as I knew her. She was very outgoing. She was an extrovert, whereas my father and I are mostly introverts. It says in here, to be a good nurse is what Jeanette wants, and she will be a good medicine to all her patients. After her training period, she would like to enlist as a Navy nurse. Good luck, Jeanette. Now, this is 1944, so the war's going on, and so that's what her plan is. Now, back to her siblings. All of them were taking part in the war effort at the time. Now, Bertha was older, and she had just gotten a job as a secretary for the local highway department, which eventually became PennDOT, like there is Mass DOT. So she had a good job, and so I think she was actually supporting her mother and some of the rest of them, because she had a good job. But in the war effort, she was also an air raid warden, and she would go around, and they would make everybody pull down their shades, and she would go around, make sure everybody had their lights off and pulled down their shades, and she got to wear a helmet. I wish we had saved a helmet. I don't know. Somebody cleaned out. I mean, she probably threw it away well before she was gone, but that's what she was doing. Bud was in the Army, and he was stationed in Hawaii. John was stationed in Philadelphia. He had to be stateside because he had a childhood accident and lost an eye. So because of his limited scope of 3D vision, he was doing some kind of desk job in Philadelphia. I'm not exactly sure what he was doing. So then there was Jeanette, and she's much younger than all the rest. And so she's trying to figure out what she could do for the war effort. And what she decided on, forgot the other members of the family. Anna was doing things like taking in laundry and supporting the family that way, but also knitting. Everybody knitted. They all knitted, and so they knitted whatever, socks, scarves, mittens, whatever they were supposed to do. Teddy had the niftiest job of all. They made Teddy a hat that had stars on it, and he always had one more star than General Eisenhower. So that when the boys came home from war, they would put the hat on Teddy, and he would salute them, and they would salute him back. You know, so that's very cool, and I wish we had kept Teddy's hat. That was a story that I always heard. All right, so what Jeanette decided to do was join the United States Cadet Nurse Corps. What this was a way that the federal government subsidized the training of nurses. They were running out of nurses. Actually, you know, we have a nursing shortage now too. But at the time in the war, they really needed them here and away. And they were running out of them, and enough women were not going into that. So the federal government came up with this program, the United States Cadet Nurse Corps, to fund the hospitals and colleges and universities that were training nurses so that the women could go for free. And that was a boon, because there was no way Jeanette was ever going to be able to afford, none of the other bands-offs had gone to college. That was the only way she was going to be able to get into nurses training, was to go and do this United States Cadet Nurse Corps. Now, what you were supposed to do then after you got trained, it was a 3-year program to get an RN degree and then a commitment to at least work 1 year in a hospital after that. So she decided to go to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia to do that. And so that's what she did. And here's her graduation picture in the Penn yearbook, and another picture of her in her United States Cadet Nurse Corps uniform. Now, eventually, because the war ended while she was in training, eventually this program went away. It funded her and all of her classmates, but there was no follow-up on serving a year in a hospital or in some kind of capacity. One of her roommates is still living, and I get to talk to her on a regular basis, and so I asked her to tell me all about this, and I said, so was there some kind of authority that you had to say? And she said, no, there was no follow-up at all. It just kind of, the war ended, the program ended, it kind of went by the wayside. And she said a lot of the women had met men in Philadelphia and had gotten married and hadn't done that anyway. She and my mom both worked at, eventually worked at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital for a number of years before either one of them met the man and moved away. In fact, Mom, Jeanette, had a couple of famous encounters. One of the doctors at the Penn Hospital at the time was C. Everett Koop, who eventually became Surgeon General of the United States, was on our televisions all the time talking about smoking and putting the warning on the cigarette packs. And also, I'm not sure why he was sent to Philadelphia, but Jimmy Stewart's father was one of her patients. I don't remember the circumstances of what he was suffering from, but whatever it wasn't life-threatening. And so she got to talk to Jimmy Stewart on the phone and tell him about his father's progress. And so whenever we watched It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas time, we were like, oh, there's Jimmy Stewart. And she always said he sounded just like that on the phone. You know, so that's pretty funny stuff. But let's get back to the letters. So the first one, when the night that I sorted these all out, I thought, okay, I'm going to try to track down these people, see if I can figure out who they were. Roy Schmoyer sort of sounded familiar. I may have heard my uncles talk about him. And there were 3 V-mails from him and 1 handwritten letter. And the 3 V-mails were written to my Aunt Bert, Bill, and the 4th one was written to my mother, and he calls her Dear Little One. She was so much younger than her siblings, evidently. I learned this from the letters. They called her Little One. Everybody who knew the family called her Little One. Okay. So I read this first one, and it says, Dear Bill. So already I'm thinking, okay, he knows the family because he called my Aunt Bill instead of Bertha. You've probably been in contact with my home and know all the dirt by now. Your letters to me since June 28th are still in France and didn't reach me yet. Well, anyway, I was in that business. But have no fear about any French girls on my string. I was too busy to even look at them. There were in a lot of these letters, there's this running banter back and forth between here and there saying, oh, I bet there's lots of French girls. I bet there's lots of English girls. And all of them are saying, no, it's not like that. You know, we don't have time. No. But that seems like an awful long time ago now after being in the hospital. It surely is strange to be so inactive, and I have hopes of getting out soon. I am not walking yet, but with treatment and exercise, it should come quickly. So obviously he's been in a battle and he's been injured, but he's not saying too much about it. As to your bowling, I admit you are getting better, but you must improve still more. That was a key because my aunt was an avid bowler. So he obviously knows her very well. And then he says, by the way, I haven't heard from John in a long time. Where is he now? So he knows John too, my uncle. So this is cool. Congrats to little one on graduation. I guess she is far from a little one now. Give my regards and love to everyone. Love, Roy. So this person knows the family. And the other two females, he's getting better. He's able to walk. And then by the time he writes to my mother, he says, I just finished writing a letter to Bud. So he knows the whole family. So this is cool. So I thought, okay, how am I gonna find Roy Schmoyer? So when you do genealogy, you do have to sort of divorce yourself from the emotional part of it. And I'm thinking, okay, these people are probably all gone. All the Banzoffs are gone. My mother died in 1993. So I could look for an obituary online. So I found Roy Schmoyer's obituary, and I just put Roy Schmoyer and Allentown, because even if he didn't end up living in Allentown, I knew he was from Allentown. You could just tell. He knew the family. So his obituary was from 2010 and said he was born in Allentown, attended William Allen High School, served in the U.S. Army, 115th Infantry, 29th Division in World War II. Was an employee of Western Electric in Allentown, which was another big employer. So of course, also the former librarian in me likes, and genealogist likes all the real good parts of an obituary. It tells you all about them, tells you survivors, wife, daughter, and his wife's name is up there, Gertrude Schmoyer. Daughter, Dr. Martha Schmoyer Lomonico of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Okay, so this is good as far as an obituary goes. So in 2010, his wife was still alive. Gertrude was still alive. So I looked for her. She came up right away too. These are from the Allentown paper, the Morning Call. She died in 2016. Same kind of stuff. She had worked for Western Electric, so that's probably where they met. Survivors, daughter, Dr. Martha Schmoyer Lomonico of Bridgeport, Connecticut. So my next step is we got to look, and that's a unique enough name that I should be able to find her right away. And I did. I mean, this took 3 clicks. Dr. Martha Lomonico is a theater professor at Fairfield University in Connecticut. And she changed her name to be theatrical. Schmoyer, I guess, isn't. She's a lovely person. And because she's a professor and, there's her email address. So, okay, I have her email address. This is right out of the chute, the first one. I thought, okay, so what do I say? Surprise, I have 4 letters from your father. So I thought about it, and I crafted a message that I eventually wrote letters to the other people that I was tracking down. So this is what I wrote to her, parts of what I wrote to her. In the subject line, I put World War II letters from Roy Schmoyer, so she wouldn't think, that I was a Nigerian prince asking for something for whatever. Hello from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. You and I are evidently in the same age range and we have similar roots. I just started looking through an old box of correspondence and I found 3 letters from 1944 or 1945 that I believe your father, Roy Schmoyer, wrote either to my mother, Jeanette Banzoff, or to her sister, Bertha. All were natives of Allentown. Roy was a sergeant in the U.S. Army and was in France at the time. And then I told her a little bit about the Banzoffs, about Bertha being Bill, Charles being Bud, John, and Jeanette, and told her a little bit about the letters. I said, evidently your father was injured and spent time in the hospital. He alludes to this, but is not more specific. At the time of the writing, my mother was living in Philadelphia. She was enrolled in the nursing school at the University of Pennsylvania. She wrote to a fair number of soldiers, it seems, and she kept all of their answers. Would you like me to send you these letters from the past? None of these people are around to give or deny permission anymore, and I don't think there are any secrets revealed that anyone would be embarrassed by. I'd be happy to mail them to you. I only wish I had looked in this box 20 years ago. So I hit send, and then I went to bed because it was a pretty full research-filled, trying to figure out things night. So when I got up the next morning, I certainly didn't expect her to have read anything overnight. I did get something from her email account, and it was an auto reply message that said, I am on sabbatical for this semester. And I thought, okay, well, we've waited this long, you know. If this is an emergency, you can write, I think it's not an emergency. I'm not going to contact her department. When she reads it, she reads it. That's fine. So I started going on and looking for the other people. But before the end of the day, she had read her messages. And she wrote to me. And she said, I am on sabbatical this semester and am actively avoiding my university email to try to stay in research writing sabbatical mode, but I dip in occasionally and just discovered your remarkable letter sent yesterday, which has brought tears to my eyes. Oh, I also sent her a copy of the first letter, an email of the first letter, a scan of the first letter. Thanks so much for taking the time to track me down. I would love to hear how you have done so. I know the internet is a powerful tool for making astonishing reconnections. It didn't take much. When you have a unique name, it didn't take much. I distinctly remember the name John Bansoff, although I don't know that we ever met. He was my father's groomsman at my parents' wedding in Allentown in 1953. I didn't know of his friendship with your mother or aunt. Now here she's very savvy. I'm sure that in those days, conventional married men, and my dad certainly was one of them, did not retain friendships with women other than their wives, alas. But it's wonderful to know that she was a close friend and correspondent while he was abroad during the war. He didn't meet my mother until several years later. My father was wounded in the fourth wave of the D-Day invasion and has a Purple Heart. This is what he couldn't say. He just said, I suppose you've heard by now, I was in that business. So the whole city knew, no. So everybody knew. She said she did a 6-hour oral history with him when Stephen Ambrose was requesting that fellow historians help procure first-hand accounts of the invasion. I retained a copy of the tapes and sent the originals to Ambrose's archives. I will never forget the day we sat down to hear his story. It was both fascinating and harrowing, as you might imagine. Interestingly, his memory skipped directly from being on the ship to Normandy and then back to the hospital in Britain. Having done my homework prior to the oral history, I'm thankful that I didn't jar what must have been an unspeakable and unimaginable trauma wading through the bloody, body-strewn waters of Omaha Beach by the time my father arrived. So, yes, she wanted the letters, of course, and she gave me her address. And then I thought, you know, I don't think it's good enough that we just I just send the letters. I think we have to sit down and honor our families and talk about it. So I was still living in Pennsylvania at the time, so I drove up to Bridgeport and met her. And so here is Roy, class of 1937. He was already interested in science and engineering. He is tops when it comes to dancing, and few dances go by without his presence. There's a lot of dancers represented in this story. When I asked her where they lived, she said 228 Northwest Street in Allentown. And when I mapped it all out, well, that's on the way to the high school. So I could imagine my uncles walking to school and picking up Roy along the way and having a good time with that. And here's Marty and her partner Carl in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And Marty, of course, as you know from the survivors list, she's an only child too, and they don't have any children, so she has all the records. So she has the pictures of her parents' wedding, and here's my Uncle John as one of their groomsmen. And and lovely, lovely pictures. And there he is again. And Roy was an avid bowler. He won awards, had lots of trophies. Here he is tallying the results of his crowd. And evidently, professionally, he was also a fan of the bow tie. And seems like a really interesting guy. And I asked Marty and Carl, I said, so did he recover fully from this leg wound or whatever he was? And they said they hadn't even really known. They knew he was wounded, but they never really, he like so many others, never really talked about it until she sat him down to do this oral history specifically for that project. And even then he jumped, he had been stationed in England, and he was only sent to Normandy because they needed people. And so he got hurt right away. So interesting. And if I hadn't tracked her down, I never would have known that from his side of the letters, because he didn't reveal any of that. So that right out of the chute was mind-blowing for me, the whole thing. So we had a good time. And we posed with pictures of her father and my mother. We posed with pictures of them and honored them. And that was fun. That was fun. It was fun to do that. Whoops. See, it goes so fast. There we are. Okay, so the next person was Donald Eichner, and I had 8 letters from him, and his were all handwritten. There weren't any of those little V-mails. And he has really nice handwriting. What are we going to do when we don't have handwritten letters anymore? That's the other thing. It sort of makes you think, how are we going to save electronic things? And then librarians, are the formats that we use now going to be readable in the future and all that kind of stuff? It's a tangled web. It's a tangled web. So he says, I certainly was very pleasantly surprised to receive a letter from you. Gosh, it hardly seems possible that you are out of high school. I always remember you as Bud and John's sweet little sister, and you are grown up in seems like overnight. So he knows the family. I mean, you can tell. And in one of the letters, in her letters to them, see, I only have their letters back to her. But because I know what other letters she wrote, she was telling them about what she was doing at Penn, and one of the things they were doing was dissecting a cat, which I didn't want to read about, so I kind of skipped over that part, because we were all cat lovers anyway. So she must have told them, all these guys, what she was studying and what they were doing. And so she mentioned that, she must have mentioned that to him, and he makes a reference to it in this first letter, and then he says, I guess Teddy is about 4 or 5 years old now. Remember the time he got struck by a car in front of your house? Much excitement at 35 North Madison Street for a while. I'm thinking, she never told me Teddy got hit. He was obviously okay because he was still in the family stories after that. This guy knew the family very well. And he's also stationed in England, and he says, I've been staying on the base most of the evenings, being real good. I usually go to a base movie or get to the Red Cross Club dance every Wednesday night, but it's sort of dead. We need some good American girls to liven things up. And he's also got a bicycle, and he's riding around England on his bicycle. And so he tells her about these things. So what they're doing back and forth is just, it's just friendly stuff. It's not anything more than that. It's just catching up with somebody that you kind of know and that you share a background with. And so, yeah, obviously he knows the family. So I thought that was a bit cool. So Donald Eichner, I thought, okay, I'm gonna see what I can do about Donald Eichner. When I looked him up online, I didn't get an obituary. I got an address. And I worried about that because he would be in his early 90s, and I thought, I had just seen my father go through memory loss and that kind of thing, and not to assume that everybody has that situation, but you never know at a certain age. And I thought, I don't know if it would be appropriate or if he would know if I sent him anything. So I still thought I wanted to find a child. And so I did find his wife's obituary. It is much older. She died in 1984. And so along with all of the pertinent information, surviving with her husband are 2 daughters, Nancy J., wife of Sid Grossman of Emmaus, and Patricia, wife of James Veckers, can't say, Veckelsrecht, something like that, of Bereinixville. So I thought, usually in an obituary, if somebody's writing it correctly, the oldest children are named first. So Nancy J., wife of Sid Grossman, probably was the older of the 2 daughters. So I tried to track her down, and so I finally got Nancy Eichner Grossman. Yes, and track genealogical research, trying to track down a woman, especially if this is from 1984. I was crossing my fingers that she hadn't gotten divorced and remarried and under a different name. She was divorced, but she didn't change the name. So I got to meet Nancy. And yes, her father was still alive. And it was a concern because he was not in a good situation and probably wouldn't have remembered and probably wouldn't have had the kind of reaction that it would have been good to have. So, but here is Donald as a high school senior in 1938. They called him Peck because they thought he looked like Gregory Peck. Peck is the boy you might hear singing a song in the halls or anywhere else in the school. He loves swing music, never fails to attend the annual school dances. And so he liked dancing too, and so he was dancing and going to dances in England. And he was a basketball player and likes building model airplanes, also likes bright colors, watch the striped socks he wears. So I said to her, okay, so where was he living? And she said, well, it was sort of a sticky situation. I was trying not to dig into family histories too much because I didn't want to keep it private. Something was going on with his parents, so that he was actually living with his grandmother at 31 North Madison Street, which is 2 doors down from where Mom was living. 2 doors down. So he was living right there. So of course they knew each other, and of course he knew when Teddy got hit by a car on Madison Street. And so, yeah. So, whoops. So, jumping ahead, she said, he never got excited about Veterans Day. Now we're coming up on Veterans Day, which is one of the reasons I'm here, I think. He never got excited about Veterans Day. All he was doing was in England, and he never was on the front lines. He never carried a gun. Memorial Day, Veterans Day, all these celebrations of veterans. He never felt as though he was worthy of any of that because he was really only had a desk job. And she said, my son did interview him for a school project, and he did talk about it a little bit, but other than that, he never really did it. He just didn't think he was in that category. And she felt kind of badly about that. And I said, well, but look at some of this stationery. It's personalized stationery. So whatever he was doing, supplies, sending supplies to the Army Air Corps, he was important enough to have personalized stationery. He was using it for personal use, but that's okay. But he had personalized stationery. Something he was doing was really important. So she was really grateful for this, and because she was dealing with a lot of the kinds of stuff that I had dealt with my father. Now she and her sister were able. She and her sister were able to read the letters to him and talk a little bit about what he remembered about England. And he did remember bicycling around England. He did remember the bands-offs on Madison Street a little bit. but not all that much. And he did look like his picture. Anyway, so they were able to do that on Father's Day of this past Father's Day. No, Father's Day last year. Father's Day last year, June of 2017. Yeah. And so after I moved up here, I did keep track of some of these people, and I did write to her every once in a while just to see what was going on. And earlier in the summer, she wrote to me and said things weren't good, and I assumed that's the way it was going to be. And then, I forget now, July or August, she wrote to me and she said, here's my father's obituary in the paper. Now, I also kind of asked these people, do they have a picture of the soldier at the time? She did know where there was a picture, but she, just because of the circumstances of where he was living and what was going on, she could not take a picture of it. And she felt badly about that. Now, like again, I didn't want to get involved in family situations. So that was that. But she was able to get the picture. And this is the picture of him in England in the Army Air Corps. And so when she sent me the link to his when she sent me the link to his obituary, it has two pictures attached to it, and one of them is the Army picture, the Army Air Corps picture. And she made sure, I didn't coach her on any of this, but she made sure it definitely said he was a World War II veteran and served with the 8th Air Force in the European Theater of Operations. You know, he might not have wanted to focus on that at all, but she thought it was really important. And that's a neat picture. So I felt badly, but at least they got to read the letters to him and talk a little bit about it before he was gone. So Paul Kemmerer is another one. His were mostly handwritten, and a couple of emails in there. And he was stationed in Italy, and he evidently was a supply person too. And his was the only one where there was something physically cut out of the letters. By the way, yes, I did give the letters back to, the actual letters back to the families, but I scanned them and I made photocopies of them before I did. And I told them that I was going to do that, and that because it was part of the project. And they were all okay with that. So, so here's Paul writing, and he says, "Dear Jeanette, it is most appropriate that I write to you on this my first at sea. Tonight we have a song service. Naturally, when I hit a bad note, I'll think of you." She was in church choir and I think in high school choir, so maybe he knew her from that. But obviously, that top one is the date that they cut out, physically cut out. And the word here could be day, on my first day at sea. I was thinking of duty. You can see there's a little Y. My first day at sea. Weird. But if you read the letter, this is kind of funny. If you read the rest of the letter, all kidding aside though, thus far my trip has been perfectly swell. Everything is swell in these letters too. Swell weather, calm waters, and swell food. Really, tonight I had 2 helpings of sirloin steak and ice cream. Not bad. What? No, I haven't gotten seasick and never expect to. A great majority, unfortunately, have been sick, this having been their first experience on the ocean. I spent a lot of time reading, eating candy, and sleeping. Not much news at this point. Too much to tell you. And it's funny, I showed this in a program, and one man in the front row said, "This doesn't make sense. Whoever censored this letter cut out the date and my first day at sea. But if you're worried about enemies getting information, wouldn't it have been more important to cut out that everybody was sick and couldn't do their job? Wouldn't that have been a little more private information?" But no, they were probably trying to get the date and whatever else was going on. So that's actually, yeah. So I tried to look for Paul Kemmerer again. I thought Kemmerer would have been, I would think that would be a unique enough name, and I couldn't really nail down a good obituary that seemed to be his. I found one that I thought was a relative, and when I wrote a letter to a woman and included a copy of the letter, and I said, "I'm not sure if this is yours or not," she got it, and then she called me and said, "No, you've got the wrong Kemmerer." So I had to go back and try again. And you're also at the mercy of whether these newspapers have digitized their holdings and whether the obituaries are even online. And if they are online, if you can get them without having to pay something. I did all of this just on regular internet searching and not usually doing anything with Ancestry.com or any of the proprietary databases. So I did find an obituary for Paul Kemmerer's mother, Florence. And in it, and that was from 1973, and in it says she was a member of Christ Lutheran Church, so they went to the same churches as the Banzoffs. Surviving are a son, Paul A. of North Brunswick, New Jersey, which is why I couldn't find him when I put in Allentown, possibly. So when I searched for Paul Kemmerer in North Brunswick, New Jersey, I did get a hit on some things, not anything that I can show you specifically, but it did connect me. I put the dots together and drew me to Joanne Kemmerer Schultheis down in Florida, one of his daughters. Now, I was not going to drive down to Florida and hand her the letters in person, so I did mail them to her. But we did have a nice chat on the phone, and so I'm asking what was the situation, where did they live, and so here is Paul in the class of 38 high school yearbook. By the way, when I had done genealogy before, I used the Allentown Public Library, and so I knew they had a nice historical collection, and it included a lot of high school yearbooks. So I could go back and look up these people in the yearbooks. They called him Dracula because they thought he looked like Dracula. To the fellows, Dracula is a real friend, for he has the unusual habit of carrying never less than $5 with him. If this capitalist wanted to live the rest of his life without working, all he would have to do is be to charge interest on all his loans. And if he'd collect his loans, he'd make Andy Mellon look like a peanut vendor. But just watch our miracle man sail through college and work him into some executive position. This is really high praise given the circumstances. But anyway, I asked her where they lived. I asked her where they lived, and they lived on Linden Street in this big house with the big tree. And when you walk around, this is the main entrance to that. Linden Street is right around the corner from Madison Street. In fact, their backyard is probably touching the Banzoff's backyard. So they were all in the same neighborhood. And their situation was that Paul and his mother were living in this house. His mother was the maid to the people who lived there, who were John Henry Lay and his wife Dorothea. So when I knew that, I put them in, and this is what Ancestry sort of teases you with, because if you really want to see the real record, you have to claim. But they have their name is Hemmer, Hemmer. The census record census taker either didn't hear it right or the computer can't really figure out the handwriting. But they're living with John Henry and Dorothy Olay. His mother is their maid, and he's living there with them. John Henry Olay was a mover and a shaker. Both of them were movers and shakers in Allentown. John Henry Olay had a big department store. He and Dorothea were pilots. They got pilot's licenses. They built the airport that is now Allentown Bethlehem Easton Airport. They were really influential, and now that I know that, I remember my uncles talking about the Lays. Of course, you're thinking L-A-Y-S, and you're thinking potato chips, you know, when you think of the Lays. I don't know who these people were. But it seems as though John Henry Olay was a real role model for young Paul, and possibly for all these other kids in the neighborhood. All of these kids were not living in a traditional two-parent family home, and they were all had each other, and they were all playing stickball in the streets and watching Teddy and all this kind of stuff, and so that's very interesting. And again, if I asked them for a picture, I usually got a picture of whatever, but Joanne, instead of sending me Paul's picture, sent me John Henry and Dorothy Olay. And so there they are. So they must have been very inspiring to a lot of the people in the thing. And this is a picture of Paul later as a businessman, and he's a fan of the bow tie too. So knowing this and looking up John Henry Olay, I did that. Whoops. See, you get to see people before. Nah. When John Henry Olay died, he left $200,000 to 13 different charities and different people, and one of them was Paul Kemmerer of North Brunswick, New Jersey. $20,000 less any outstanding loans. Kemmerer's mother worked for Olay and his first wife for years, and that happened in 1985. So that's an interesting story too. Everybody's story is different. Everybody's story is different. Whoops, one more person. Oh, you bitches. Come on. Come on. Oh. Are you breaking? There. Lawrence McKeever, I only had one V-mail from, and it was a 2-pager. It was the only one that was 2 pages. And he wrote to my aunt, and he calls her Bertha, dear Bertha. And I thought, okay, he's not a family friend, because he didn't call her Bill. He was in Australia. And so he talks about poinsettias blooming and bigger than we have at home and all this kind of stuff. And he writes, at present, I'm being treated for a skin infection. I don't think it's serious, but the treatment is a long, drawn-out process. Other than this, I've not been sick a day. I'm glad you like your new boss. I always liked Henry and think he will make a good superintendent. So he knows her from the highway department. They must have worked together. Give him my regards and tell him I appreciate his offer and hope that I can take advantage of it. Sounds as though the old boss may have said, when you come back from the war, we might have a job for you. Bertha, you never did tell me who the new assistant superintendents are. So he knew her from work. So that's interesting. He was much older than all the rest. And so when I tried to track him down, it turns out that, and this is his niece. We'll get to her in a second. Turns out that he and his wife did not have any children. So in order to figure out who I could give the letters to, I had to kind of draw out a family tree. It does have, this is a very succinct obituary, but at least it says he was the husband of Helen J. Kramer Landis McKeever, and that he was working for the Pennsylvania Highway Department, and that he was a son of the late Walter E. and Annie L. Lush McKeever. So knowing that, I could look for other obituaries, possibly with these people, and figure out siblings. There aren't any siblings listed there, but he did have siblings. And so that's how I was able to find Carol. And so I apologize for this. This is really, she was very excited because he was her favorite uncle, and she had never expected anything to come of this. She told me he was very well, he was a good carpenter. He built his own house, and she told me lots of stories about him, and that was very nice too. She didn't have a picture of him with her, so didn't get a picture of him, but I was glad to get her the letters back. Now, these people were all just common, ordinary people. There was somebody lurking in the hallways of Allentown High School who was going to be quite famous later, and he was 2 years older than my mother. And I remembered this when I was going through all those high school yearbooks, and it was Lido Anthony Iacocca. Lee Iacocca, who eventually would become very famous for cars. Looks exactly like that, and he's still alive. Class of 1942 in Allentown High School, engineering and science, except that the yearbook person misspelled engineering. Lee is a raconteur extraordinary, and not only can he quip with the best, but he can pun with the worst. If knowledge really is power, he is omnipotent. This, together with the ability he has developed in managing and directing school affairs, will prove a great asset in his career of engineering. And then you see, he's in National Honor Society. He's the president his senior year. He's in the debating society for 3 years. He's in Latin club for 3 years. He was the manager of the swim team. Well, so he was a leader early on. I don't know if Mom ever passed him in the hallway, but that's interesting to think about. Before I get to the last one that I want to talk about, I want to talk a little bit about my mother. This is how I knew her. She was president of Women's Club, and she, when she's this age and in these letters that she wrote to her mother, she's this tentative young woman that I didn't recognize, because to me she was always this forceful woman, and she knew what she wanted, and da-da-da-da-da. But here in these letters that she wrote back to her mother and her sister, they were only an hour and a half drive away. And she and her brother would go home to visit almost every weekend anyway. But in these letters, there's sometimes when she wants to bring somebody home with her, and she says she's having a really rough time, and I don't know, and it would really be wonderful if I could bring her home with me. And I'm thinking, well, the woman I knew would have just said, I'm bringing her home. That's the end of that. So it was a revelation to me that she was such a teenager. She was away from home for the first time. And but then I see glimmers of her in her letters too. I get the glimmers of the person that I knew, the forceful letters that I knew. First of all, evidently there were so many nursing students in Philadelphia that they didn't have places for them to stay, so they commandeered apartment buildings. And so the apartment building that they were living in still had regular tenants in it, but I guess the nursing students were told, if you make enough noise, those people will move out, and we can take over those apartments. So the very first letter she writes back to her mother, she says, "Last night I almost caught a mouse. It was in apartment 2B, and I'm in 5B. These girls were scared stiff of it, and it was only about an inch long, not including the tail. I took some Kleenex and got it by the tail, but it jumped into a closet. That's their hard luck, not mine." We still have tenants living here, so we're supposed to make all the noise we can. The quicker they get out, the quicker we get settled. The girls screamed when they found the mouse. Some crabby man came out and asked what was the matter. One girl said, "It's a mouse." Then the jerk said, "You little babies, afraid of a mouse," and slammed the door. That's that. Well, I guess I'll have to close now. Miss Lynch will be in soon. See you Sunday. Love and kisses, Jeanette. So they had a dorm mother, sort of, so to speak. They had curfews. They weren't allowed to go out early in the evening. They had to come back, and they had study hours, which evidently she used a lot to write letters home. Talk about getting caught. 2 girls got heck last night because they were up after 10:30 studying for a test. After 10:30, they went into the closet and closed the door. They were my 2 roommates, so I had to help them. I told them that you could see the light shining under the door. In fact, it was shining right in my face. Finally, Mrs. Harris came in the room, and right away she said, "There's a light on in the closet." I had forgotten about the side of the door. There's a crack. "Then where are those 2 girls?" I was giggling, and my poor stomach was shaking. With that, she threw open the door, and there were Joan and Trudy. She told them to stop their cheating, that it wouldn't help them anyway. They got into bed, and Mrs. Harris went downstairs. All through the apartment, you could hear everybody laughing. I'm telling you, I could hardly keep quiet. Then they set the alarm for 6 o'clock and put it under my bed without my knowledge. When it went off this morning, I jumped up and couldn't find it. Finally, when I did find it, I couldn't shut it off. They just sat in bed and laughed. I was so mad that if it would have been their clock, I would have thrown it at them. No fooling. After all that confusion, they went back to bed until 7:15. Boy, was I ripped up. It's amazing that somebody gets in trouble for sitting in a closet and studying after 10:30. Some poor fellow outside is whistling, "O Come All Ye Faithful." This is September 12th. He's a little out of season. It must be some fellow at the university, only they would be so foolish. By the way, if you want to, you can buy me a compact in the 5 and 10 cent store. My compact that Bill gave me broke. Just a cheap one. If you can't get cheap ones anymore, never mind. Just stuff like that. And then she'd get mad if they didn't write, and sometimes she would write to Teddy, and sometimes she would draw Teddy. And that was her drawing of Teddy. Now here, she's got 4 stars on a collar. I was pretty sure that the family story was that it was a hat that had the stars on it. It says, "A 4-star general waiting for his 2 non-commissioned brothers to come home," by MJB, also for his little sister who doesn't have a star. So these were really insightful to, find out what my mother was like at a very young age, and knowing that, reading this stuff and knowing that she's going to turn into this person. She did, like I said, she was president of the local women's club. She was a stay-at-home mom for me until I was in junior high school, and then she reinvigorated the nursing thing, and she went and was a nurse at local women's clinics in the area. And when I was in high school, Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore started a nurse practitioner program, a very intensive one that was for like 1 semester. And so Baltimore was only about an hour and a half south of us. And so she went down there during the week and came back on weekends and got a nurse practitioner certificate so that she could do more at these clinics. And so there she's modeling her jag with her stethoscope stuck in her pocket like a real medical professional. That's the kind of person that I knew. She was very flamboyant and very, very outgoing and that kind of thing. And so it was very interesting to me to see this other side of her. And that's one reason why when I'm talking about these things and I hear people say to me, I have letters from back then, from between my parents, and I'm afraid to read them, I encourage them to read them. It seems sort of like maybe a breach of privacy, but wouldn't these people, if they were here, want you to know? And as I told some people before the program, for some people I've recommended, if you don't really want to read them, get a trusted friend or a relative to read them first, and then maybe they can summarize them to you or say there's nothing in here that's bad or frightening or revealing or whatever. I think it's just, it's a glimpse at a different time when people were doing different things, and all these young people, these people were so young, and they're just writing back and forth to each other about dances and what they're doing. One of the things that Mom did was go to football games. I guess her brothers really taught her about football on TV, I'm assuming, if they had a TV. Maybe not. They lived within walking distance of the football stadium, so she is at an Ivy League school, and she gets to go to football games. And she's the one who taught me, oops, I hit the mic. She's the one who taught me about football, and we were football fans together. So in one of the letters, and I can never find it, she tells her mother and sister that Penn is playing Duke, and Penn had an unusually good season that first year for her. And Duke was supposed to win the game, and Penn won by surprise. And she had gone with two of her best friends, and it was terrific. And then in the next letter, later the next week, she said, go to the movies. If she had been a contemporary person now, she would have wrote, OMG, for oh my God. Go to the movies. There's the newsreel that's before the movies. They had the newsreels before the movies. Shows footage of the Penn-Duke game, and you can see me and Trudy and Jean in the front row yelling for Penn. And I'm like, oh my God, there's footage. There's footage. I've been trying to, I have written to 3 or 4 places now, including the Penn archives and the Duke archives, and neither one of them has it, to try to track down this newsreel. All the newsreels that are freely available online just have war footage, as you would expect, and I don't see any that have local football things, but also these newsreels were tailored city to city, so it may have only shown in Philadelphia. But maybe somewhere, someday, I will see footage of Mom yelling at the Penn game. Now, that's the person that I knew. The person that I wanted to find the most was Louis Krieg. There are 19 letters from him, and these are a few of them. What I read through his letters was very interesting because it turns out that he is a classmate of hers in the class of 44. And what I learned from his letters, his first letter is from March of 44. He went off to Army training. Evidently, 49 boys from the class of 44 left in March to go to training, to go to basic training, and the school gave them permission. And the school graduated them on time with everybody else and said, it's the war effort, you guys can go, we support you. You're already in the yearbook because the yearbooks are always laid out early anyway. So we're giving you a diploma, you can graduate, if you can come back for graduation, you can come back for graduation, but go, we're with you. So Louis Krieg was in her class, and the first postcard he sends to her is from Texas, and he says, I'm in the medical department in a medical training battalion. Our training starts on Monday and lasts for 17 weeks. How about some news of AHS when you write? Well, that whistle is going to blow soon. And he's just a kid. He's only 17. Mom was only 17 because both of their birthdays were later in the year. Yes, I know, he says, yes, I know how you Allentown High School students are, so I'll excuse the delay in answering my last letter. He's asking for things from home, he's asking about their classmates and what's going on. And what he did is he went to Texas, and then he got sent to Fitzsimmons General Hospital in Denver, Colorado to learn how to be an X-ray technician. And then he got sent back to Texas to the training camp, and then eventually sent over to France. And in one of the letters, he sent her 3 photographs from Notre Dame Cathedral at Reims. So they were writing back and forth, and I can tell from his letters that they're exchanging stories about learning about anatomy and chemistry and science, because both of them are learning this kind of stuff because she's learning to be a nurse and he's learning to be an X-ray technician. So there's Louis from the yearbook. Looks like a fun guy. He's a swell friend and an all-around good fellow. Everybody's swell. We envy him his sparkling blue eyes and his mop of wavy blonde hair. His above-average intelligence won him membership in the National Honor Society. So Mom was in the National Honor Society too. So that's another way that they knew each other. So when I tried to track him down, again, I didn't find an obituary. But I found his wife's, June, from 1987. And it says she was the wife of the late Louis E. Krieg, Jr. And this was in 1997. So he died before then. So some other good information in here is that they were members of Christ Lutheran Church, along with the Banzoffs, and then survivors, son James of Allentown, daughter Susan, wife of Kirby Schaefer of York, which is not far from where I was living in Lancaster, and Sally, who lived down in Florida. So that was 1997. That's 20 years. But I thought, I'm going to not do this daughter in Florida, but either James in Allentown or Susan. And I got to tell you, when I was thinking about, okay, James is probably the older. It turns out not to be that way. But I'm wondering, should I write to the son or should I write to the daughter? Who would be the one who would have the stuff if they have it? So I actually wrote to the daughter first, Susan. And I didn't hear, and I didn't hear, and I didn't hear. And this was a mailed letter because it says she lives in York, and she says her last name. And, you know, if you own property, you're very easy to find online. So, no, it was easy to find everybody after some fits and starts. I also found his mother's obituary from 1987, and it says she was the widow of Louis E. Krieg. She was a member of Christ Lutheran Church. A son, Louis Jr., died in 1974. Then I felt bad, worse than, just the way this whole project was going, because if he died in 1974, then this is something very bad that happened. All these other men, Donald Eichner was still alive at the time. All these other men lived into their 80s or 90s. Now, my mother died at 66 because she had cancer. But he died in 74. I was a junior in high school in 74. I couldn't imagine, and I was assuming his kids were about my age. I couldn't imagine losing your father that early. Something must have happened. Something bad must have happened. So, again, I had this contact information. Susan didn't contact me right away, so I wrote to James. And eventually Susan got back to me, and she said, I've been traveling. I'm sorry. She expressed surprise, of course, at these letters. And so we decided to get together and meet. But she gave me some information. The Kriegs lived at North 19th Street, which was in a different part of town. But they did go to Christ Lutheran Church. And so that's another way they knew each other. And so I got to meet Sue and Jim Krieg. And as soon as I saw Jim, I'm staring at all these old yearbook pictures. I said, wow, you look exactly like your father. And he said, yeah, I used to get that a lot. I used to get that a lot. Wait, come on. So they had a box for me. They had a box for me. It didn't look like my box. They had a box for me. Jim said we had a very nice lunch, and Jim said, I have a box for you out in the car. I have no idea what's in it. Jim, because he lives in Allentown, when his mother died, he was the one who got all the stuff. He was not the oldest, Sue's the oldest, but he's the one who got all the stuff, and they just moved it from one house to another, and he never looked in it. He knew that his father's military stuff was in there, but quite frankly, he'd never looked. So I thought, okay. So by this time, I was getting ready to move back to Massachusetts, and I was dealing with my own boxes of stuff, as you've seen. And I put this one aside with a note on it so that I would not mistake it for anything else. And as the time got closer and closer, I thought, I have to look at this box. I have to look through this box and see what's in it. Before I can't move with it because I need to give it back to them. I mean, they said, you know, you're doing this research. You can have it as long as you want. And I said, no. I got get it back to you. So when I opened it up and I started sorting their stuff out, whew, I was amazed. Louis Krieg saved every bit of his military career, and his mother must have saved everything, and his wife must have saved everything. And then somebody put it into a plastic bin to protect it. He saved the basic field manual that they were issued. He took pictures too. He saved the hospital. Ugh. Okay, here's a picture of them getting on the train in Allentown. He saved the hospital guidelines. He saved the first aid handbook. He took all these pictures. There were albums that said U.S. Army on them, and we opened them up, and they had little slots that they deliberately wanted them to take pictures. They were filled with all these pictures. The first one is them leaving the train from Allentown, and he's got lots of pictures of him that somebody took in his various uniforms. He's even got a picture of him learning how to use the X-ray equipment in Denver, Colorado. And of course, his insignia from his uniform, all the negatives of all of the photographs. And one photograph, when I opened the album, this one was right at the top of it. Oh, and when you turned every photograph over, he had written where it was and who was in it. What a treasure. And his handwriting looked exactly like my mother's. I thought they must have had the same teachers. Amazing that he had written, I mean, just for that, I couldn't believe the treasure that was sitting right in front of me. And when I opened one of the albums, this was right on the top. And it just fleetingly reminded me kind of Hogan's Heroes, because that was probably my only intersection with World War II, with the big bulby car. And you can tell it's a military person coming down with a secretary military person coming down. And when you turned it over, it said, General Eisenhower at Reims, France. He also wrote, note the 5 stars on the license plate. Like, oh my God, this is General Eisenhower, and there's 5 stars, which means, of course, that Teddy has 6. So that's pretty cool. But General Eisenhower, I'm like, how does he even know? And then it dawns on me, when Mom graduated from nursing school, General Eisenhower was the speaker, the graduation speaker, and she got to shake his hand as she walked across the stage. How do these people keep running into General Eisenhower? This is just weird. And then coming home on the aircraft carrier, he and his buddies had all these pictures. I'm looking at this, these people don't know what they have, and they should have looked. It's just absolutely amazing. So I I wrote to Sue. Of course, again, librarian and genealogist in me was like, I want to do something with this, but it's not my stuff, it's theirs. And so I just I casually emailed her and said, okay, I'm done. I scanned a couple of things, you know. I'm done. I'd like to give this back to you, and then we have to talk. And so we met, and I opened the box, and I started pulling all this stuff out, and her eyes just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and she said, I had no idea. I had no idea. She knew some archivist, perhaps, and she was going to try to figure out what to do with everything, but she had no idea what to do with all of this wonderful stuff. In fact, she wrote back to me then and said, you know, I can't thank you enough. If you hadn't asked, we wouldn't have even known what was in this box. And then I'm picturing, you know, if nobody looks in this box, when Jim and Sue are gone, somebody else is going to see it and not know, maybe. It just... Anyway, by that time, early this year, I thought, oh, I'm going to look for Louis again. Well, the Allentown Morning Call now has digitized more stuff. So here's his obituary. And when I did get to talk to Sue and Jim, I said, you lost your father so early. It was prostate cancer. And in '74, it wasn't treated like it is today. And they said it was pretty quick. He got the diagnosis, and then within a couple of months, he was gone. He worked for PPNL, the big tower in the Allentown, and was a member of the JCs. And you know, he's still got that. And even in his obituary, has that wonderful smile. And then, of course, knowing all of this background, was he susceptible all along? Because when they did the X-ray stuff, they didn't use protection at all. And their family always wondered. It could have definitely been something like that. Because he's not using, I don't know what part of that is all the equipment, but he's obviously not, you know. Now when you go to the dentist's office, they cover you all up, you know. They didn't do that. They had no idea. So it's possible that was a contributing factor. So what can we learn from all of these stories? Look in your boxes and what you have. Remember the stories. If the people are not around anymore, remember the stories that they told and write them down. We really should have written down the story of Teddy's hat and the stars. Some people have suggested that would make a good children's book. So we'll see about that. Ask the questions when you can, and look in these boxes and figure out the connections. And are there other places that might want these? Sue has since then, Louis's daughter, told me that her niece and nephew, and they've all looked through all the photographs in the box, and they're looking to digitize them. But of course, they want to get both sides because they want to get the caption on the other side too. And so they're actually looking for some kind of archive that would take it. Unfortunately, there aren't archives that are going to take all of this stuff all the time. And even our public libraries are not going to take all this stuff all the time. A lot of us don't have, they can tell you, a lot of us don't have, although in your fancy new building you might, don't have the facilities to maintain all of these kinds of things. And a lot of the ones that would say, yes, I'll take it, would probably just take that plastic bin and it would be in a corner and no one would know that there's this marvelous picture of General Eisenhower walking down the steps, or documenting the whole history of these guys from Allentown. It's interesting. So be prepared to be surprised and learn about things that you never thought you would learn about. And so that's my story, and thank you very much for listening to it.
All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.